We begin with last night's debate. Howard Fineman is editorial director for the Huffington Post Media Group. He's also an MSNBC political analyst. And Susan Page is a wonder, and she's also the Washington bureau chief for USA Today. When one of the many frictions last night between Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney in that 2-hour debate, was it only 2 hours? Romney figured out a way to blame Santorum for President Obama's health care plan, which was modeled, of course, on Romney's own plan up in Massachusetts. Well, he turned the tables by citing Santorum's support for moderate Republican turned Democrat Arlen Specter. Who would have thought Arlen Specter would ever be mentioned again? Well, let's watch.
There was a study just came out about 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, that listed 15 ways in which Romney Care was the model for Obamacare. The real fundamental issue here is government coercion.
The reason we have Obamacare is because the senator you supported over Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, Arlen Specter, the pro-choice senator of Pennsylvania that you supported and endorsed in a race over Pat Toomey, he voted for Obamacare. If you had not supported him, if we had said no to Arlen Specter, we would not have Obamacare. So don't look at me. Take a look in the mirror.
You know, Romney had his amen chorus there last night. What a bunch of little, little square-shouldered little perfections. You can imagine them in the audience all doing what they were told to do. Little goody-two-shoes applauding on command. But are we allowed to say the word pissant on television? This debate last night, Susan, was embarrassingly peevish, petty, small. A debate on national about who's going to command us in the world. We're fighting the Chinese. We got terrorism still out there, way out there. We've got to deal with Iran. And they're sitting there talking about, well, all those years ago, you back Arlen Specter, your fellow Republicans. Give me a break. Mickey Mouse Club.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Help me here, Susan, objective reporter. Objectively, wasn't it really petty last night?
You know, it was not one of those. We've had some good debates. I mean, we've had 20 debates. You'd hope some of them would be good debates. Last night's debate was a debate of candidates who know they may not have much time left on stage. You know, after next Tuesday's primary, Romney could be in real trouble if he loses Michigan. Santorum could be fading fast or surging. I mean, so you really find them trying to pick things that differentiate themselves from the other guy and push it home. It was a debate that left President Obama off pretty scot-free until they got to the very end and talked a little about foreign policy.
And if anybody only had one day to live, would they live it last night? I mean, was that anybody's idea of life on this planet? It was so, I love politics. Everybody knows I love it. I love it so much. But what were they talking about?
First of all, to say that it was about Republican intramurals is to overstate what it was. They were getting deep into the history of legislation and legislative maneuvering and trading votes in the
bridge
Senate.
To nowhere and the Olympics. I'd like to never hear about those.
Well, our friend Roger Simon of Politico said that Rick Santorum sounded like he'd studied at the Bob Dole School of Debating.
Oh, yeah. Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, here he is. Santorum tried to defend his record as a former Washington senator, not the baseball team, who championed earmarks by arguing that Romney took earmarks for the Salt Lake Olympics. Here it comes. Be ready for the excitement. Let's watch the
debate. He's out there on television ads right now, unfortunately attacking me for saying that I'm this great earmarker when he not only asked for earmarks for the Salt Lake Olympics in the order of tens of millions of dollars, sought those earmarks and used them. And he did as the governor of Massachusetts, $300 or $400 million. What happened is there was abuse. When the abuse happened, I said we should stop the earmarking process. But I did say there were good earmarks and bad earmarks.
I would put a ban on earmarks. I think it opens the door to excessive spending on projects that don't need to be done. I think there are a lot of projects that have been voted for. You voted for the bridge to nowhere. While I was fighting to save the Olympics, you were fighting to save the bridge to nowhere.
You know, Susan, they're trying to get the job FDR once had, and Teddy Roosevelt, and John Kennedy, and Ronald Reagan, and they're looking like they're trying to be Jerry Ford.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, Romney clearly wanted to get under Santorum's skin, and Santorum was in a position all night where he was defending himself and getting engaged in these discussions about how the earmark process works. You've gone too far into the weeds when that happens. In fact, at one point, Romney had a pretty good line where he says, "I don't know quite what you're talking about, but let me make this point." I want to make. I mean, for Romney, who wants to portray Santorum as a Washington insider, Santorum did his business, the business for him last night by trying to explain Washington processes that a lot of Americans think don't make any sense.
You know, Susan and Howard, we know the problems facing this country. They're real. The reason people watch programs like this because they're real. It isn't just a pastime. We've got an unemployment situation which is endemic. It's chronic. We're never getting back to 4%. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact we have real competitors in the world like China, India, and Russia, and South America now. We have terrorists out there who get up every morning thinking how to kill us. Okay. And these guys are talking about earmarks.
Chris, this was a case of tactics and small bore tactics overwhelming any larger vision. Yeah. It had been several weeks since the last debate. It evidently gave the tacticians inside of each campaign way too much time to think of tiny little maneuvers.
I know,
and of course, Rick Santorum played right into it, as Susan said. This was a huge missed opportunity for Santorum.
Yes.
What he needed to do was say, forget about all that legislative baloney. I'm not about legislative baloney. Here is my big vision. At the very time that he had gone to the top of the polls, he needed to enlarge the stage.
So well said.
And instead, he bored into the past and into all this legislative minutia. It was a terrible mistake on his part.
Susan, we know he has a message. He wants to build a Republican Party and a presidency that's looking out not just for the rich, the Fortune 500, but for the sons of Italian immigrants, for people living in the parts of the country that are overlooked economically, that have been left behind economically. The older people in Pennsylvania who he did say don't have the money to go to Arizona and to go to Florida. They're stuck living on their pension checks and their Social Security, if they're lucky to have pension checks. This is a real important challenge out there for people living on this planet. And what they talk about